of all to introduce myself. My name is Andrew Auld. I'm the Commercial Director at PTFS Europe. We're a software company that specialises in supporting libraries software. And we specialise in particular in open source systems. Just before I get going, there's a few housekeeping things. Just to let you know, the session is being recorded. You've been asked to keep your microphones muted and videos off. You can extend the viewing screen by clicking the Hide All button on the top left-hand side of the page. And then please do, at any point, put any questions in the chat on the right-hand side of the screen. Fiona, my colleague, is going to be monitoring those questions and chat, and will answer your questions as we go. And also a message from CILIP is to use the CILIP Showcase at CILIP or hashtag CILIP Showcase 21 to tweet about this session and anything else that you're currently doing today in the showcase. So just to get on with the presentation now, the theme of this presentation really is linking, as I think the previous one did, to the pandemic that we've been in. But we want to talk about why you shouldn't let systems lock you down. We've all been used to being locked down ourselves, and I think what we're all looking forward to most at the end of this, well, it's a great big hug, and I'm sure librarians out there are probably looking forward to getting back to actually physically being in the library and being among your users again, if you've not been able to do that during the pandemic. But what the other negative things that are about a lockdown are the feelings of being trapped, perhaps, of being not in control of your own destiny, unable to take your own decisions. So what do you want a good system in a library to do for you? I'm going to play a video now, which will talk all about what good systems in a library do best.
So for us, for a good system in a library, it needs to do 3 things. So the first thing it needs to do is engage our users. So at Marjan, we are very focused on our students. We absolutely put students first. So we needed something that would look appealing to students and would be able to fit the mold of kind of their understanding of libraries and how they use them, and to make sure that we're able to engage. Make sure that they're able to engage, should I say. So that's really important, and I think a part of that engagement is having enough features that make people stop and think about how they might use their library as a resource, or for our teaching staff as a pedagogical tool, rather than just something that's kind of always sat there in the background. So actually using it as a resource and presenting all of the different levels of engagement that are possible. So for us, having the student-facing catalogue and having that fully customizable within COA was a huge win for us. We've never had a catalogue that's been that customizable, to my knowledge. So we've been able to use sort of the OPAC as the central hub for all of our information and services. That will just, so it's a launch pad really to link out to other places and other services that can't necessarily be held within the library management system itself, but it's always that starting point. The second thing I would say that's really important is integration. So being able to integrate your library management system with lots of other things. So we are integrating our library management system with things like the CLA, so we can check permissions on things. We're integrating it with Discovery so that we have a one-stop search for absolutely everything that students have access to. We're currently working on a further integration with the reading list management software, and that wouldn't be possible with, say, a less flexible system. And we just feel like the possibilities are endless now that we have sort of an open source system as well. The third thing is usability. So I think if it's all very well having a nice shiny system with lots of bells and whistles that does everything, but if your staff can't use it or find it difficult to access, then that's a barrier in the beginning, well, from the get-go really. So one of the great things about COA is that it is on sort of a librarian's level. So it's quite good for beginners. You don't need a lot of systems knowledge to make it work. Obviously, systems knowledge goes a very long way, but for a very small university with a small team, we don't necessarily have that that availability in our staff. So all of our staff are multifaceted. We all do more than one thing. And we don't have a dedicated systems librarian per se. So all of us need to be able to chip in and manage different functions and different modules. With COA, we have that. So we've effectively been able to kind of look at it on a modular level and say, right, somebody's going to handle circulation, somebody's going to handle cataloging, somebody's going to handle acquisitions. So they become kind of the master of their own area. And we then have somebody in the background who joins up all the admin processes and can say, right, that's how that connects to this. So we've got very much a whole team approach to running our system. And we didn't have that before with our previous system. It was very reliant on one person. But we definitely feel like we're getting that with COA, definitely from PTFS. And the usability is for the second part of that comes from the support. So we feel supported in using this LMS. We know that if we can't make it work, then we can ask PTFS and they've got our back. They can come in and say, have you tried this, and give us solutions. And I think for us, it's a lot about confidence building in that we feel very, very able to kind of find our own way with COA and know that it's very flexible and that if one way doesn't work, another way might, but it feels like a partnership between Marjon and PTFS. It very much feels on the same level. So I think those are the most important things.
I think that it's the Humble library management system. We subscribe to, we use the Cohort library management system, and it just sits central to all the library activities. So for example, it looks after circulation. The self-issue kiosks connect to Cohort, and so do our safe lockers, you know, using the SIT2 technology. The acquisitions, purchasing books connect to Cohort too, our library management system. We're using EDI to get all the book information and order books. And also we're using the newer technologies such as the Gobi API to get book information too. There's also things like our discovery system, which plugs into our LMS, and also our reading lists connect and get lots of information from Cohort about the bibliographic data. And yeah, and further integrations for our user data, which connects to our central IDN system. And also we have developed some custom integrations. So it all links up into our VLE. So there's a nice library accounts area in our VLE. So the library system is really core to everything that we do.
Okay, so we've seen the good things that systems can do and that your library system can do for you. But what are the barriers? What are the things that you don't want to get in the way? You'll have noticed that I'm not doing very much talking, and I'm going to be using videos throughout to talk about this subject. So we're going to move on to the next video from our partner libraries.
I think the barriers that systems create are sort of similar for users and for staff in many instances. I think there's an expectation that systems will work seamlessly. So people's experience of online transactions or social media platforms, there's an expectation that it'll work in a similar way. And similarly for sort of around library systems, people, certainly our citizens, people who use our services, want that similar experience. So when they don't get that same experience, it can create a barrier. I think also maybe in some senses, barriers are created definitely by sort of digital inclusion and people not having the skills. We often talk about, you know, so many people transact online, or even students who work online, but actually using Facebook or using social media isn't the same as using, you know, a search system in a library catalogue or something like that. So I think there's definitely a barrier between the expectation of what people get in their private life and what they get in the library side of things as well. So when they don't necessarily replicate each other or work in the same way, I think that can cause problems. I think from a staff side of things, it's interesting, you know, we've got people who've worked in the library service since they left school. I won't say how long ago some of them left, but for significant periods of time, but they've adapted and changed all the way through. So I wouldn't want it to seem that these are barriers that people struggle against, but they are continually things that challenges people come up against, that things change and evolve.
So is it important that library systems move always in the direction of these more familiar systems that people are using in their daily lives?
I don't necessarily, it may not necessarily be important, but I think it, you know, it simplifies things for people if it looks and feels the same. So, you know, when we procure systems or we look to develop and buy things, often people say things, you know, oh, will it do, like suggest a title like Amazon does, or will it allow me to talk to other people like Facebook does? So the frame of reference is often in terms of a commercial, or at least a, you know, a private sector social media platform, whatever. That's how they associate it. And so if you're from outside of the library world or even inside it, it's, you know, does it do something like X or like Y? And unsurprisingly, Amazon, Facebook are the big ones that appear, you know, time and again.
So I think I touched on one of them before. So I think sometimes it's in terms of usability. So for instance, if you have a system that is very rigid in its kind of admin, so it's not very flexible or fluid, and there isn't much kind of join up between modules, that can be a bit of a barrier for staff, because that means that we've then need, as a smaller university, potentially need somebody employed as a systems librarian who knows that system in and out, when we certainly don't have the funding for that kind of thing as a smaller uni. So another barrier might be the potential for development, and that might be whereby you can have developments, but you're dependent on a third party or your supplier making those developments for you. I think that's probably a barrier in itself, whereas I don't feel we have that with COA because it's open source. If there's a project that we think, you know, we'd really like to be involved in that, or we'd really like to carry this forward, that development lies in our hands. It's very customer led in that way. I mean, I would feel perfectly comfortable in going out to other COA users within the sector and saying, we need something for this, COA doesn't do it, what do you think, would this benefit your library, you know, and then going back to PTFS and saying, what do you think? I like that kind of collaborative element for development, and I think other systems that don't have that, that is a barrier, because you're effectively paying for what the supplier sees as the need rather than what the customer sees as the need. I would say for students, it's probably to do with connectivity and having something on a mobile device. So I think in this day and age, everything needs to be optimal on whatever device you're holding. So that can be a barrier to access in itself. So if you have a system that doesn't necessarily optimize for a mobile screen or for a tablet or for a laptop, then or loses functionality between devices. I think that is a barrier in itself, because I know from our students, there'll be 3 clicks and then they're out. And they've lost interest by that point. And who can blame them? You know, we expect immediate access. You know, we get that from other suppliers or other web-based things like Google. So we need it to respond in those ways. We need to respond in the ways that users expect us to.
So we're talking about open source. You may have heard of open source, but what does it really mean to be supported by open source systems? And what are open source communities? And does open source actually open some doors for your library in terms of the systems that you use to support your work?
Libraries are such a natural fit for open source. Libraries are home of innovation, freedom of thinking and independence. That's what open source brings. Librarians are also used to the professional ethos of sharing ideas and experience, collaborating, and that hits at the core of open source as well, and open source communities. Every open source project is as strong as the community around it, and the community is not just developers, it's support companies, users, and anyone who's interested in the project. And there's a sense of genuine community and spirit around those open source communities. Everyone understands that the better the project becomes, the better the product becomes, the more users will get involved, the more users get involved, the better the product becomes. So everyone shares ideas, experience, and everyone contributes to that community. It's not just developers. Users can contribute their time to testing, to providing documentation, or even just to talking about the product and hosting visits and promoting it more generally. So what we gain from it is access to ideas and solutions from everyone around the world who's involved in that community.
So specifically the products that you use in your library that are open source, what are the communities like there?
We've been Koha users for over 11 years now and felt very much part of the community from the start. Everything is available online. We were welcomed very much to that, and we've contributed back to it as well. Everyone has been pleased to be introduced to open source, to Koha. And the events have shown that there is a real spirit of community and sense of shared experience around it. We've also started developing communities within that community. So we're establishing a group for health libraries specifically using Koha. So that will enhance the sharing of experience and knowledge.
Okay, so we don't want our systems to be stuck in time. We want them to evolve. Do open source systems get developed in a successful way? This next little clip will tell you about that.
The open source model allows us to plan for the future without fear, really. Proprietary models mean you're tied to a particular company. So your whole future and the future of that product, that software, depends on the viability of that company. They could go bankrupt or be taken over by another company or have a drastic change of development. There are also no licensing issues. Licenses can change in the future. We're free from that fear. Individual programmers at companies are also likely to move, and with that the quality of the product changes. With open source, the code is all there. There are many developers around the world working on successful projects, and they can withstand the loss of individuals leaving. The whole development process is transparent, so we can see online the roadmap of what is being developed, what people are interested in developing. We can submit bugs, we can see what bugs are being worked on. It gives a whole sense of transparency, that there are nothing hiding there for the future that we need to be wary of. What we can also do with open source is, if we find that what we need to be developed is not in the overall roadmap, we can develop independently. We can use resources ourselves. We can ask or commission a developer to work on a specific piece of software for us, or we can pool resources with other libraries who are interested in the same development. Essentially, there are no dead ends. The nature of the software being open means we can also plan integrations with other software.
We use the Cohort library management system, which is open source, and we find it a great system because it's so open. We can make loads of custom developments to it. So if there's a bug and we want it fixed, we can dive into the code and fix it, or we can call on the community to help, and our hosting company can fix that as well. If there's any extra developments, they've got a couple of ways of doing that. We can ask the community for help with developing the new developments, and also we can create our own. There's a great custom API tool which you can create your own endpoints in the API, which is great. And also Cohort is built upon open source software itself. You know, there's a MariaDB database system. There's also the Apache web server, and itself it's written in Perl, which is open. So all that, it means that the open source solution for us, it works really well.
I think the big difference for us when we were looking to procure, so it's been about 3 years since we started working with PTFS, but open source was something we were keen to look at. We were told, you know, through the procurement process that we should look at the whole market, so we couldn't just look at open source. But we were keen to look at that as an option, and I think when we made the decision to award the contract to PTFS, the flexibility of developing the system was part of it. So when we took on the system, there were a couple of things that were not necessarily in place but could be developed, and I think it's always been really positive when we've spoken to colleagues at PTFS where we said, I wonder if it could do this. Then the answer has always been, well, let's have a look at it. Whereas, being blunt, sometimes the experience in the past is either that's not on the roadmap, or it's not in the pipeline, or yeah, we can look at it, but it'll cost you £1,000 just off the bat. You know, whereas much more here, there was that collaborative approach of, well, you could do this, or have you thought about doing that? But it's also been about as well, which, you know, PTFS have always come to us and said, well, have you thought about it doing it this way? So it was never just a case of, we'll build you what you ask for. It's kind of, well, what is it? There's a desire to understand what it is we were trying to do, which is always helpful, rather than just deliver what they want and take the payment for it, and then you end up going, oh, actually, it's not really what I needed. It's always been, well, what is it you're trying to achieve? Can it be achieved where you are? So I think that, I suppose part of it is the fact that it's open source, but I think part of it's also the ethos of people who work with open source systems. You know, that's always the intention there, is to try and work to a solution rather than just bolt something on. So that's always been of value to us.
So all of this good news, but what about the impact on your library budget? Let's hear about what an open source system is likely to cost you.
The main reason most libraries move to open source, despite the benefits of the development platform, is to save money. And historically, it's been proven that open source projects are cheaper to run and maintain. And that's a crucial element in these times for libraries. Our experience with Cohort over 11 years has proven that. From the very first year, the cost of implementation was less than to sustain the same proprietary system for that year, and we've made ongoing savings every year since. Another key element is that everything is included. The source is open, so there are no hidden costs to implement specific modules. Allows you the ability to plan, to see what is in the system that you can implement. What it's given us as well is the confidence to implement other open source systems. So it's not just the individual saving on Cohort. We've followed a similar model with our archive system. We've chosen a system, open source system called Samvera, and we've implemented software and hosted it ourselves. So the data representation software Metabase, we host a version essentially for nothing. What that's provided is not only the savings within the library, but also credit within the organisation, which is important. They've seen us as having the ability to save money, and every library is currently struggling to prove themselves within the organisation and financially, and open source has greatly helped us do that.
I think if you talk to people sort of generally about open source, I think there's an expectation, certainly within the authority, there's an expectation that open source will be cheaper, you know, that will come at less of a cost because you don't have those proprietary softwares, you don't have the licenses associated with it. And I think, you know, it would be remiss to say that budget didn't come into it. And I think the fact that it comes at a more realistic or more manageable, realistic price point that comes with what you're getting, you know, where one of the reasons we moved systems was because we were out of support and maintenance contract in our previous one. And so we were able to get support, but it always came at a cost. Whereas from the get-go with this system, with open source and COA and PTFS, all we were ever really paying for was support and, you know, the support of it. You know, okay, we pay for some hosting and other bits, but it was mainly, we knew that the costs that came with it were the support to run and develop the system. So that kind of made perfect sense for us. And yeah, it did come at a significant budget saving for us, which wasn't our intention necessarily to go there, but it certainly is a major advantage for, you know, for open source systems when you're not relying on, you know, expensive licenses for it. And you trade off in some other areas, you know, that we go through procurement processes and we balance cost against functionality, but we always balance, this time around certainly functionality came above price point. So it wasn't, we didn't go with a system just because of the price. The price was in addition to the functionality that was offered.
So we've heard all of these things over the last 25 minutes about why an open source system can potentially take you out of lockdown, free you up. And importantly, we wanted to make sure you heard those things from our customers, not from us. So hopefully you've enjoyed what they've had to say. And I really want to extend my thanks to the 4 colleagues at these libraries who helped us with this presentation. You can access these and others on our YouTube channel if you'd like to. And just our message really is, don't let your systems lock you down. We've had enough of being locked down. So come and talk to us at PTFS Europe, come to our booth today, arrange a session with us today, or on another day if it's not suitable today, and we'd be delighted to take this discussion further. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day. If you have any questions, please pop onto the booth and ask them there. We're running very short of time. Thank you very much.